Thanks again, Professor, for joining. Um, I'm happy that we're finally able to do this. I think I was looking back at the email threads. It's been a little over a year, and there was a point where I thought maybe we weren't going to be able to make this happen. But I'm glad that now we finally have had a chance to arrange something. So thank you again for being here.
I'm happy to be here, and I'm sorry about the ragtag way that I got here.
It's all good. It happens. I'm used to it. The first thing I wanted to begin with, uh, back in September of 2024, my friend and I, we released an album. It's called Babylon. And the origins of the title for the album actually came from you. Because I remember I was sitting in your class one day, and at that time I was thinking about the city of Babylon. And simultaneously, you said something. You said something like babbling on. And I was like, oh, that's perfect. Babylon. And so that became the title for the album. So it's
Well, that's
been
funny.
over a year since that album's been out, and its title comes from you, and you just found that out now. So I think that's interesting.
That's cool. But you're not sharing the royalties with me, I gather.
I haven't received any yet.
Well, I hope that changes.
I would hope so too. Yeah. Thanks. But yeah, I think that's interesting because I think there's so many examples of that in real life where small things that we can do can have enormous effects somewhere else, and we might not even be aware of them.
That's a world that professors live in, really, because most of the time we don't see the students much after they leave our classes. There's rare exceptions, and this is one of them. I have a chance to see you again, which is great. Pardon me. But the hope of anybody who's in the teaching business at all is that they do have some positive impact on the students in their classes. So, but it is a case where the feedback loop is pretty much not there.
Yeah. How often, if ever, do you see an ROI on teaching people?
Well, I see it every semester because I get a chance to see how the students perform on the beginning of the class and how they perform at the end of the class. And if they do well, which there's always many students who do, that's a return on the investment for sure.
Mm.
So it's not like we're operating in a vacuum. In fact, we get lots of feedback all the time. If students decide they're not going to come to class, that's some feedback.
Yeah, that is that, and that's a different kind of volunteering, huh? Not coming to
Yeah,
class.
yes, indeed.
You know, before
And
we
now,
started this recording, you said something about the purpose of life, and I heard it from Brianna Weist. She said something like, you know, everybody's purpose in life, it's kind of, we have different callings, and the way she sees it is it's like a volunteering opportunity. Who's willing to answer this calling and go out in the world and do this sort of a thing? So I thought that was like a neat little way to put it from her.
that's good. I hadn't heard her say that, but she's a lovely person and was a great assistant. So I'm glad to hear it.
Mm. My favorite lesson from your class, the one that was most memorable to me, was on the topic of the duality of truths. So, for example, absence makes the heart grow fonder, but at the same time, out of sight, out of mind. How do
Yes,
you balance those two truths? They both exist.
I've got a dozen of them, as you may recall. Pardon me. And there's some truth on both sides usually, um, for both sides. They're contingent on the circumstances. So you can't take one of those little homilies and live your life according to it, because you have to have the judgment to make your way, in a way that's good for you and hopefully good for those you love and who love you and the world at large.
You have dozens of those examples. Which is a pair that is the toughest to deal with?
Well, that's a good question. I can't recall many of them at the moment, um, but uh, I like "Look before you leap" and "He who hesitates is lost," um, because we're all faced with a lot of decisions all the time. Many of them uh, very minor. Uh, whether to run across against the red light if you're a student on campus and you don't see any cars coming. I see a lot of that, and would be dishonest if I didn't say I've been there myself. um, but in more important things, it's a judgment call often, uh, when you act, and of course how you act. So, but yeah, psychologists are used to hearing uh, these little words of wisdom and recognize that the wisdom may be very compact, not necessarily all encompassing. And by the time students get to college, they know this stuff. They may not have reflected on it, but they know it.
Yeah. You mentioned making a
You,
decision and, making a judgment a few times now. What's the best advice you have on making a call, on making a judgment?
my advice is, excuse me, not be afraid to get advice from people who know you and from other experts in the area if you can have an opportunity to visit with them. Uh, the you're asking me what I think the best advice is.
Yeah, or just
Get
any tip
advice.
you have on making decisions. That's something that I've realized more and more in the past few years, where, especially for men, it's very important to be able to make a decision and make one quickly. And so I ask different people, what is your take on it? What's your greatest tip for decision making?
I think the more knowledge you have about the topic or how much you can learn about the alternatives that you're dealing with is sound advice. I don't know if it's the best advice, but I think it's sound advice. You say a lot of times you don't have a lot of time, and that's for sure true. Uh, in that case, the best decision is to have learned more before that moment, so that you have as much knowledge as you can have in guiding your decision. It's especially true for the big ones. Uh, am I going to ask her to marry me? Am I going to accept this job? Am I going to quit this job? I'm going to skip a semester and work, save up my money. These are all not, even those three are not all equally important for sure, but they're all big decisions that can have and do have a lot of impact on your life. So knowledge is power in that respect.
You have written several books, and I've read one of them. It was a college preparation book, and it was a great book. I wish I found it as a freshman or even before. The most memorable lesson I got from that book was you talk about how most people, we convince ourselves that we'll have more time to do something later, but it's a lie. And I've experienced that myself. I'm pretty sure everyone out there has as well. Um, yeah, I just remember that lesson specifically.
Well, it's a good one for sure. Um, the if you have a decision to make tomorrow, you know the density of the things that are in front of you in the short term, and there's a lot of them almost every day. For next week, it's still pretty much true that your mental image of your week is pretty dense. By which I mean there's a lot of entries for it. But how about Valentine's Day of next year? Um, what plan should I make for that? Well, it's easier to make a commitment now because you don't have the same density of things that you're working on having to do with next Valentine's Day or anything a couple of months out and far beyond. So I think a lot of that has to do with just the fact that your mind, as it runs across your projections for the future, the number of entries is very dense for tomorrow, even later today and this week. Um, I know that I'm going on a trip starting on Monday, so uh, that would impact on anything I plan to do next week. But middle of March, no, I don't have a trip planned, or I don't, as far as I know, I don't have anything planned for the middle of March at the moment. So sure, if you want me to make a commitment for that time, I'm likely to. And the commitment is I'm going to study all day long, every day in the second week of March. Yeah. It's easy to say now because there isn't that other density of opportunities. So we always think we have a lot more time later than we have now, and that can get in somebody's way big time.
Yeah, absolutely. And another lesson that I've
My
really
example,
say that again.
my example was in the book that just having to do with studying for a test. I'll study for a test starting a week from Monday. Yeah, okay.
Yeah. I like how you mentioned this because this past year I've realized that speed, the world worships speed. You know, how fast can you make decisions? How fast can you execute? How fast can you run in the shortest period possible? And the thing about time is also that you also change. If you think that you can stall something for a while, leave it for the future, you're forgetting that you're also a part of that equation and you will change as a person, but also your circumstances and all that included. And other people in your life will also change. I ran into someone a couple months ago and they seemed kind of acidic, they seemed kind of toxic. But that surprised me because the previous times I ran into them a couple years ago, they were the most sweetest person I had met. And so it was a real surprise to me. But when I reflected, I realized, well, it's unfair for me to expect them to be the same. Time changes people. That just happens. So, speed, time, speed, all these things, there's a lot of variables involved.
Yes, I mean there are some. Pardon me again. There are some continuities because people's personalities have a thread of similarity across time. Um, I'm a slow decision maker, and I've always been a slow decision maker relative
That
to some people
surprises
I know.
me. Wow. But
Um,
that's hopeful to me as well.
well, it's a mixed blessing, I'll tell you that. Uh, but that probably hasn't changed much since I was 30 years old to how old I am now, which is above 30. I know it's hard to believe. uh, but and so I can factor it in. But I take your point that people have very unfortunate things happen to them. A loved one dies, they smash their car, they lose a job, and those things have not all the same, but those things all have pretty big effects on your
Yeah.
daily life. And so they can seem very changed. And a lot of times that can be for the better, but not always, as we all know.
Yeah. You and me, we both share a love for a city. It's called Tallahassee out in Florida. If I'm not mistaken, you were also the dean of the university out there. Is that correct?
I was the dean of something called the College of Arts and Sciences. So you may recall in my book, I explained how universities are organized. So a big university like the University of Houston or Florida State University or UT Austin, I've been a professor at all three of those schools, excuse me, and all big universities and medium-sized universities are divided into colleges. So there's a business school, UH, we have a lot of them, architecture college, the engineering college. Each of those colleges has someone who is basically in charge of it. That person is a dean. Uh, and so I was a dean of the College of Arts and Sciences at Florida State, which is a school that includes everything from the English department to the math department to the chemistry department. It's a very broad college. Lots of units were in that college. In the architecture college, there's not many units, maybe only one. So anyway, it's good for students to know a little bit about the organization of the school that they're in, seems to me.
Yeah. Going back to
But in,
Tallahassee.
yes, Tallahassee, I was the dean of the biggest college, arts
Yeah,
and
that
sciences.
I love that city. It's a very nice city, Tallahassee. You know, it's a different slice of life out there.
What brought you to Tallahassee?
I for spring break, my family and I we drove out to Orlando. And then on the way back, we stopped in Tallahassee. And we just kind of stayed for a bit and I really liked it. It's such a blessing to be in America because there's so many different pockets of the country. And there's all kinds of places that you never think about, like Tallahassee for me, until you go there and you realize, wow, like people live here and it's beautiful.
It is. Um, it's very interesting. It's in North Florida, as you know. And it's even a little hilly, so it's not completely flat like most of Florida. And I used to tell people from my university office I could look out the window and see both palm trees and pine trees. Uh, and it's at that kind of border uh, ecologically.
That's a great way to put it.
And there's a lot to do there. It's the state capital for a small city. There's a lot to do.
Yeah.
It's a state capital, as well as having one of the great universities in the country. And when I was there, one of the great football teams.
Yeah. Of all the universities that you've been a part of, which one was your favorite?
Oh, that's an impossible question to answer.
I imagine.
It's like saying which of your children is your favorite. Um,
Yeah.
I have really enjoyed each of these places and have a very fond memories of all of them. That's not to say everything was perfect. Of course, it wasn't. But all in all three universities had a lot to offer. Pardon me. And uh, I think gave students great opportunities.
Yeah. No, I believe you. I really do. And what made you want to become a professor? What got you involved in all of this?
Um, I was somebody who didn't know what he wanted to do. Uh, when I was a freshman, I went to a small college my freshman year, and then I transferred to the big University of Minnesota. And I won't take too long with this, but I had a hard time picking a major, for example. For a while, I thought I might want to be an engineer. Um, then I thought I'll be a math major. Um, that fizzled out pretty quickly when I got to partial differential equations. You have to be able to do math if you want to be a math major. Um, and so I wandered around for a while in the undecided category. And a friend of mine said, why don't you go to the counseling center here at the University of Minnesota? They are said to have a great one. And my response to that was, I ain't going to no counseling center. I'm not crazy. And so I wandered around like that for a little while. And then finally, I was starting to drive myself crazy. And so I went to the counseling center. And what I didn't know was that the University of Minnesota was the home of some of the people who built the finest tests in the world for helping people, giving them information about just the problem I was having. So I took a test there. It was called the Strong Vocational Interest Test, named after a guy named Strong, and later was revised. It's now called the Strong-Campbell Vocational Interest Test. And David Campbell was on the faculty there at the time. So I went in and they gave me this test, and I came back a week later. And nothing was computerized in those days, so they scored it. And the counselor I had said to me, you know, you don't look very much like a math major according to this test. I said, because I can't do it. Then he asked me a question that changed my life. He said to me, well, what courses have you taken that you actually like, that you really liked? And I said, well, I really liked my intro psych course. And he asked me what professor I had. I told him, and he said, well, oddly enough, that professor also has a big interest in math, and he's very technical in some of the work he does. How'd you do in his class? I said, I made an A in that class. He said, well, go see him. Find out his office hours and go see him. So I did that, and I knocked on his door one day during his office hour. And I didn't know this at the time, but he was almost like a manic depressive guy. He was very manic when he saw me, excited. And he took me on a tour of his lab, which was down the hall from his office, and chatted with me for a while, and then said, and incidentally, I bet that he talked 90% of the time, and I talked 10% of the time, if that. The way I'm doing now with you, not giving you a chance to say a God word.
It's all good.
um, so I left there and was thinking about it a little bit. And 3 or 4 days later, I got a phone call. And I answered the phone, and the voice on the other end said, I'm Professor so-and-so, and from the University of Minnesota. I'm in the general college. Footnote, at that time, the general college was, in a way, a junior college as a part of the University of Minnesota. In fact, junior colleges were invented at the University of Minnesota. So he was in the junior college part of the university. People got admitted there just to that college. Anyway, and then he said to me, Dr. LaBerge, who is the math psych guy that I've had visited, Dr. LaBerge and I were talking, and he raved about you. And we have a teaching assistantship position here in the general college, and I wonder if you might be interested in looking at it. Now, this just floored me because Dr. LaBerge, as I mentioned, talked 90% of the time, and I talked hardly at all. I did make an A in his class, but I doubt it was the highest A in his class. And so, having had introductory psychology, I became a teaching assistant for introductory psychology. in the general college at the University of Minnesota. And that took me in touch with graduate students, other professors, and so on. And pretty soon I was hooked. Um, it's a science field. I liked science. Um, Knowing a little math is helpful. And I started as a lowly freshman, well, a sophomore really, uh, hanging around with students, who some of whom were the graduate students, and they taught me a lot. That's how I became a psychology major and psychologist.
Wow. Thanks for sharing that story. Yeah.
Chance, in a way,
Say that
played a
again.
big role. Chance played a big role. I mean, that I took the advice to go to the counseling center. I took the advice to go see Dr. LaBerge, and I was taken in by these people, even at the big university.
Yeah.
I found I found a home.
Yeah. And you've been in it ever since. Higher
Yeah, I
education.
graduated from the University of Minnesota and stayed there and went to graduate school um, there. I changed my interests a lot, but the University of Minnesota has been among public universities a top 10 psychology department for almost 100 years now.
Wow.
Some famous psychologists have either graduated from there or taught there. You may have heard of B.F. Skinner, for example. Um, he was a professor there for a while.
Wow.
It's lots of others. So anyway, it's a great place, as have the other places I've been. There's a tremendous number of great universities in this country.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. And um, before we continue, I wanted to ask, do you have time or is this
No, I'm okay until just a few minutes before the hour.
Oh, okay, yeah, yeah. Because earlier I wasn't sure if you were gonna wrap up with that story, so I didn't want to. I wanted to respect your time. Yes.
Oh, thank you. No, I'm flexible.
Okay, cool, cool. So I guess the other thing I wanted to ask you was in throughout your whole experiences, how do you think a person knows what they really want? Is there a recipe for everyone to follow to figure out what it is that they truly desire? Or is it really just chance, you know, taking risks, taking chances?
Well, I think that there are some aids. I mentioned one already, too. There are tests that people can take, and I often recommend this to students who are floundering around because I identified with that. I was definitely floundering around. And so, so taking this thing called the Strong Campbell Vocational Interest Test, for example, and having someone who is a counselor uh, read it with you after you've taken it to just go over it. They're not going to tell you what to do. They're going to just talk about you and what this test has suggested about you and the types of work situations, professions that you appear to be somewhat similar to, and it may help people narrow down. The other thing that happens a lot is just the opportunities, the chancy things that happen, but you also make your own luck a lot of times. So, so looking at yourself, looking at the possible opportunities, um, again, easier said than done. I'm well aware of that. Uh, but don't be afraid to ask for help. Uh, don't think you're crazy if you go to a professional and seek some advice. As I thought it was a crazy idea when I first heard it, and yet it was one of the smartest things I ever did. Uh, and so if you know people, one thing you can do, and I may have mentioned this in the book that I wrote, that you mentioned, is ask somebody for what I call an informational interview. And you can sometimes call people out of the blue who you know are in some business or some profession or some niche, and just say that you would really appreciate it if they could spare some of their time and talk to you about their work or about. And a surprising number of people will agree, not everyone, uh,
Yeah.
and uh, but it's a real learning opportunity, and you just don't know what's going to happen. They may try and get rid of you as soon as they can. That happens. Move on. Uh, they may say you ought to talk to so and so, and you can say, "Well, can you uh, let so and so know that you made that recommendation?" And then I'll call them. So don't be afraid to be a little bit bold in advocating for yourself in terms of getting information that can help you.
Yeah.
So that's the nature of my tips about that, to the extent I have them.
Yeah. No, it's interesting you say that. And I can't remember if it's Luke or Matthew. It's something biblical, but that saying, ask and you shall receive. In my own life experiences, I am shocked by, as what you said, how many people say yes to things. It is truly astounding. And all you have to do is take that little risk of asking.
Yeah,
Yeah.
well, I'm sorry to have put you off so long because you asked, and now finally I've made the time
Oh,
for it. But
I didn't even think of that. But that's actually a good example. I've asked so many people to come on the podcast. You're episode 173, and the list just it keeps going on, and I'm grateful for that. But really, that's what it is. You just ask people, and you get no's. That happens, is what it is. But the amount of people that say yes, it truly is astounding. And another thing I wanted to talk to you about was, in my experience, for example, when I shadow therapy sessions, what I realized was everybody just needs a pair of ears to hear them out. They really need somebody to listen to them, to say whatever they have to say. And so I want to ask you, what makes visiting a therapist different from having a friend who hears all your life's problems? What distinguishes the two?
well, I don't really know. I'm not a therapist, and I've never been trained as a therapist. Um, but therapists have a lot of experience in dealing with uh, people in uncertain and stressful situations, and uncertainty is itself stressful. Uh,
Mm.
when you have, like, just a simple example I was talking about, it didn't seem simple to me at the time. Pick a major, low. Um, Everyone has to do it. And it doesn't mean you're picking an occupation. Most English majors don't teach English, uh, but so but trained therapists are trained, and that's a plus. However, good friends are good friends, and parents are parents, and siblings are siblings, and they can all pitch in to help if they're of a mind to. Uh,
Yeah,
and you
no,
don't know where
agree.
the best come from.
Say that again.
You don't know where the best wisdom, where your truth is going to come from.
Yeah, that is true. That's also why I think books are so useful. And as I said earlier, why I wish I had read your book before I had even entered college. Because I remember hearing it from somewhere that what a book can do for you is it could save you 5 years. It could take you 5 years to learn a particular lesson. But if you pick up a particular book, that might have just saved you the 5 years for whatever it might have been. There it is. That's the one. That is the one. Yeah, highly recommend it to incoming freshmen and really anyone.
You'd mentioned that, and I haven't pulled it off the shelf in some years, actually. So
Yeah.
it's
Yeah, I remember you had mentioned it at the beginning of your class. Like, hey guys, I wrote this book, just putting it out there. It's in the library. And I remember I went to the library and got
yeah, it's and I never tell people go buy the book. I mean, it's okay with me if they do, but it's in the
yeah.
library.
But that was also a very good way of advocating for yourself, as you mentioned earlier. That's another thing that I've been trying to figure out in the past year is that every human being, existence is an advertisement. That's what I say. Every human being has to figure out a way to advocate for themselves in different fields. What are your tips for
Right.
advocating for yourself without seeming like you're trying to sell yourself or you're putting yourself in people's faces?
Being helpful, I think, is a good way to advocate for yourself because people are generally speaking appreciative of someone who will help them. And it's easier to ask for advice, for tips, uh, for a favor um, if you have built even a small amount of trust uh, with your audience. Um, I'll tell you an anecdote. So when I was the chairman of the psychology department at the University of Texas, um, I felt that that department had not benefited as much as many others at the University of Texas at that time in how much fundraising had been done in support of that department. And I didn't know how to approach that, do anything about it. Um, but I was at a social gathering uh, for reasons I won't go into. I was actually at a social gathering at the president's house, the president of the university. And I looked around the room, and there were obviously a lot of successful people in that room. And I looked around more carefully, and the tallest guy in the room had always had people kind of cluster around him. So I waited my turn, and I went and introduced myself to him, and I said, given the occasion, there weren't that many academics there, and I introduced myself and said I'm a professor at UT, and he said, "Oh, that's so nice to see somebody like you here." And I said, "I wonder if I could come and see you sometime." This was a brave act on my part. I'd never done anything quite like that before. And he said, "Sure, I'll be happy to meet with you if you like." And turned out he lived in San Antonio. So one day I drove down to San Antonio, had lunch with him. And he was a very, very successful guy. Uh, in his office, in his company, he had a dining room and a cook. So I had lunch with him prepared by his office helper. And I said to him, um, lots of departments at the University of Houston, whom I know, pardon me, the University of Texas, um, have groups that help support them. And I would like to have one of those for my own department. And I wonder if you would help me uh, create such a group. That was an extremely gutsy thing for me to do. I've never done anything remotely like that before. And he said, the truth of the matter, he said, "I don't really care about the psychology department, but you seem like a nice guy, so I'll help you." And he did. He made some of his friends get on a group to learn about the psychology department. And some of those friends were uh, names you know. Uh,
Wow.
in Houston, In Houston, there's a street called Fondren Avenue, and he put a member of the Fondren family on my group.
Wow.
Um, uh, he put Mrs. Luby of Luby's Cafeterias on my group.
Whoa.
And so from that, uh, there's a long story here, but I'll make it short. We got together. I made sure the best teaching professor in my department gave a little after dinner talk uh, to showcase my department. And those people helped me raise money for the psychology department. Big time. Up. We ended up getting a new building,
Wow.
multi-million dollar building. Um, and that was all from just being gutsy, way out of my comfort zone in approaching people for help. And I think that is good advice for anybody who wants to get some advice, some help, uh, is to reach out and go overcome your uh, reluctance to ask for things. Uh, I wasn't asking for myself, but as far as I was concerned, for the faculty and students in my department at UT Austin, which I loved and still do. Uh, and at Florida State, oddly enough, I had an almost identical experience because there was not a fundraising group for the big college that I was the dean of. And I was successful at doing it again. By then, I wasn't quite as scared, but it's always a scary thing to do something like that. And the worst thing that can happen is somebody can just say no, and so you move on. But at the moment, it doesn't seem like it.
That is an incredible story. And something I realized, or something that I think, I suspect, the easiest way to approach someone is to not know anything about them. And in that story you shared, I imagine you didn't know who he was, but you got gutsy and you spoke to him. So the approach makes a difference, huh?
Yes, I mean, it wasn't. I mean, everyone at that president's house was somebody who was a respected and respectable person. I knew that. Um, but yeah, I mean, I happened by chance more than anything to pick a guy who really worked, helped out tremendously,
Wow.
tremendously.
No,
He
that
didn't do
really
it
is an
from.
amazing story. Yeah. If I may ask, what's the building at UT Austin?
It's called the Charles and Sarah Seay, Psychology Building,
When I'm in
Mr. and
Austin,
Mrs.
I'll have
Seay.
to check it out, and I'll have to remember
It's
you
on,
there.
it's on the corner of 26th and Speedway.
Mm.
Mr. and Mrs. Seay were extremely generous. Uh, they're gone now, and the building's been added to since I left, and uh, so on. But it was good for the university, and certainly good for the psychology department.
Wow.
And that's the other thing. It's a lot easier to ask for a cause than it is for your own pocket. You know what I mean? But sometimes you have to do that too. So
Yeah.
circumstances.
Thank you for sharing that story. And that actually leads me to ask you my next question. Money talks. In the reality of the world, how true is that in your experience?
Well, it's a generalization, but I mean, there's a lot. There's certainly more than a grain of truth to it. Um, I mean, I think a moral person doesn't run their life entirely on that basis, but it's also realistic to know that you have more. generally speaking, you have more options in life if you have some means, and people with means can provide those options to other people. And many, many people with means are generous to do that. Um, that's one thing I learned.
Yeah,
Mr. and
thanks for
Mrs.
sharing.
C gave a lot of money to the University of Texas to help. They didn't pay for the whole building, but they paid for a pretty doggone good piece of it. And so it was their daughter who was on the little committee that I formed, and she brought this to her parents. So it's certainly not the be all and end all, not in a moral world. It's not and shouldn't be, but there's no doubt that it allows one to open more doors for oneself and for others.
There's two places when I visit them, I'm overcome with the flood of nostalgia. And that's Lone Star College, it's the local library down the street. And the other one is the Houston Premium Outlets out in Cyprus. When you look back at all these institutions that you've been a part of, are you overcome with the flood of nostalgia or not
Sure,
really?
no, I'm a sentimental guy, and I could tell you stories, but I'm taking up too much of your time now. Um, but no, sure, my
Yeah.
wife would attest that I care about the past.
Yeah. Beautiful. I care about the past. The way you said that. Beautiful. Well, Professor Foss, thanks so much for being here. I really appreciate your time. I was wondering, do you have any closing thoughts? Anything you felt like you wanted to say but you didn't get a chance to? Or something on your mind that you wanted to express?
Oh, I appreciate the opportunity. It's nice to connect with a former student in this way, and I wish you continued success and the very, very best as you go forward.
Thank you, sir. Likewise. I suppose until next time, man. Hopefully.
All right. Thank you, sir.
Yeah. Do you have any questions before we log off?
No, just reach out to me every now and again and let me know how you're doing.
Okay, for sure. Yeah, likewise.